My ex-wife snuck into our room and shaved my current wife's head while she was sleeping to embarrass her at our daughter's wedding. I couldn't let her cruelty go unanswered. What I did next caused her to flee the ceremony in tears. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The phone shrieked across the kitchen like an accusation, cutting through the peaceful evening air that drifted through my open window. I had been chopping vegetables for dinner, enjoying the simple ritual after another long day of lectures on American Revolution battles that my students would probably forget by Monday. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Gertrude Foster. 2 days before Ruth's wedding, and she was calling. Nothing good ever came from Gertrude's calls anymore. "Hello, Gertrude." I kept my voice steady, professional. The same tone I used when particularly difficult students challenged historical facts. "Henry, I won't allow that woman to ruin our daughter's wedding." Her voice sliced through the phone with surgical precision. No pleasantries, no small talk. Pure Gertrude. I set down my knife carefully, wiping my hands on the dish towel. "Beatrice is part of my family now, and Ruth invited her herself." "Family?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "That cancer patient you picked up? She's been married to you for what, 3 years?" "I gave you 17 years, Henry. 17 years and a daughter." My jaw tightened. "Beatrice is my wife, and she'll be at the wedding. Ruth wants her there." "Ruth is being polite. She doesn't want to hurt your feelings, but having that woman sitting in the front row where I should be sitting alone, it's humiliating." I began pacing the length of my small kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear. "You'll be in the front row, Gertrude, on the other side. That's how divorced parents handle these things. Don't lecture me about divorce, Henry. You're the one who walked away from 17 years because of some midlife crisis fantasy." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "I walked away because you were having an affair with your real estate broker. Let's not rewrite history." Silence crackled through the line. When she spoke again, her voice carried that dangerous sweetness I remembered too well. "Ancient history, Henry. What matters now is Ruth's special day. And I'm telling you, if that woman shows up, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of marriage you're really in." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, come now. A sick woman who can barely get through a dinner party without rushing to the bathroom? Ruth deserves better than having her wedding photos ruined by your charity case." My free hand clenched into a fist. "Don't you dare. I'm not making threats, Henry. I'm stating facts. Some women just aren't cut out for family events, especially ones as fragile as your precious Beatrice." The cruelty in her voice transported me back 7 years, to those final months when every conversation became a battlefield. But this time, she was targeting someone who'd done nothing wrong except love me. "Ruth invited Beatrice, and Beatrice will be there. End of discussion." "We'll see about that." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You always were naive, Henry. Still believing in happy endings and fairy tales. Some people just aren't meant to have those." The line went dead. I stood there holding the silent phone, staring out at the Boston skyline as evening shadows stretched across my kitchen floor. My hands were shaking slightly, from anger, from the familiar helplessness that Gertrude always managed to provoke. 7 years since our divorce, and she could still reach right through the phone and twist something inside me. But this time was different. This time she wasn't just attacking me. Setting the phone down, I leaned against the kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Gertrude's venom still echoed in my ears, but my mind drifted backward, seeking refuge in better times. Times when her voice carried laughter instead of poison. I could almost smell the coffee brewing in our old kitchen on Maple Street, sunlight streaming through yellow curtains Gertrude had sewn herself. She'd been 28 then, humming while she made breakfast, her dark hair catching the morning light. Ruth was barely walking, toddling between us in her tiny pink pajamas, and we'd take turns catching her before she tumbled. "We'll grow old together, won't we, Henry?" Gertrude had asked one evening, curled against me on our blue sofa while Ruth slept upstairs. We'd been watching some romantic movie, and she'd traced patterns on my chest with her fingertip. "Promise me we'll be like the Hendersons next door, still holding hands when we're 70. I'd kiss the top of her head, breathing in her shampoo scent. "Of course we will. You, me, and Ruth. Forever." Those Sunday morning pancake sessions, flour everywhere, Ruth standing on a chair to help flip them while Gertrude guided her small hands. The three of us covered in batter, laughing until our sides hurt. Gertrude would make funny faces to distract Ruth from the hot griddle, becoming a completely different person. Soft, playful, maternal. Christmas mornings were magical then. Gertrude would spend weeks preparing, wrapping presents with elaborate bows, staying up late to assemble Ruth's toys. She'd make hot chocolate with real whipped cream while I read Christmas stories aloud. Ruth would fall asleep between us on the couch, and Gertrude would whisper, "This is perfect, isn't it? This is everything I ever wanted." The summer vacations to Cape Cod, renting the same little cottage each year. Gertrude teaching Ruth to build sandcastles, while I grilled burgers on the tiny deck. Evening walks along the beach, Ruth collecting shells while Gertrude and I planned her future. "She'll go to Harvard," Gertrude would say confidently. "She's got your brains and my determination." Those were the years when Gertrude's determination felt like strength rather than manipulation. She organized our lives with military precision, schedules, meal plans, social calendars. I'd come home from the university to find dinner ready, Ruth's homework completed, the house immaculate. Gertrude took pride in creating our perfect suburban life. "Professor Miller's lucky wife," the neighbors called her, and she'd beam with satisfaction. She'd host faculty dinner parties, charming my colleagues with intelligent conversation and perfectly prepared meals. I'd watch her across our dining room table, thinking how fortunate I was to have found someone who understood both my professional world and my need for a peaceful home. Ruth's first day of school, Gertrude crying harder than our daughter. "She's growing up too fast," she'd whispered, watching Ruth disappear into the building. That night, she'd pulled out photo albums, tracing Ruth's face in baby pictures. "Promise me you'll always remember how sweet she was at this age." The quiet evenings when Ruth was older, doing homework upstairs while Gertrude and I shared wine and discussed our days. She'd listen to my stories about difficult students and departmental politics, offering practical advice. "You're too patient with them, Henry. Sometimes people need firm boundaries." Even our arguments were different then, passionate but respectful. Disagreements about Ruth's curfew or vacation destinations that ended with compromise rather than warfare. Gertrude could be stubborn, but she'd listen to reason. We'd talk things through until we found solutions that satisfied us both. Saturday morning garage sales, Gertrude hunting for antiques to restore while Ruth and I carried her discoveries. She had an eye for hidden treasures, old furniture that she'd sand and paint until it looked expensive. "Everything deserves a second chance," she'd say, running her hands over a scarred table. "You just have to see its potential." But even in those golden memories, I could detect the first hairline cracks. Gertrude's need to control every detail, her inability to accept when things didn't go according to plan, the way her jaw would tighten when Ruth made messes, how she'd reorganize my study without asking. Small things, then, easily overlooked in the warmth of our shared life. Standing in my current kitchen, the happy memories felt both precious and painful, like looking at photographs of someone who died. The memories darkened as they approached 2018, the year everything shattered. I'd started noticing changes in Gertrude that spring, new clothes, different perfume, sudden enthusiasm for evening book club meetings that never seemed to involve actual books. Her phone became her constant companion, buzzing with texts she'd answer in another room. When I asked about it, she'd shrug. "Just work stuff, Henry. Boring real estate negotiations." But she'd clutch the phone protectively, tilting the screen away from me. The late nights started in June. "Showing houses to clients from out of town," she'd explain, returning home after midnight with elaborate stories about difficult buyers and lengthy negotiations. But she never mentioned specific properties or clients when I asked for details the next morning. I found the first real evidence by accident in July, checking our credit card statement for a charge I didn't recognize. Dinner for two at Chez Laurent, an expensive French restaurant downtown, on a Tuesday night when she'd claimed to be showing a condo in Cambridge. My hand shook as I stared at the receipt. $230 for dinner. Gertrude always complained that Chez Laurent was overpriced, insisting we stick to casual places when we ate out. But apparently she'd found someone worth the expense. The trail became easier to follow once I knew what to look for. Hotel charges on days she'd claimed to be at real estate conferences, purchases at Victoria's Secret when she hadn't bought me anything intimate in months, wine tastings, theater tickets, weekend getaways, all for 2 people, none with me. Confronting her felt like stepping off a cliff. I waited until Ruth was safely back at college, then spread the credit card statements across our dining room table like evidence in a court case. "How long has this been going on, Gertrude?" She stood in the doorway, still in her navy real estate blazer, scanning the papers with calculating eyes. For a moment, I thought she might deny everything. Then her shoulders straightened, and I saw the defiance I'd learned to fear. "You never understood me, Henry." She moved to the table, gathering the statements into a neat pile. 20 years of being Professor Miller's perfect wife, organizing your life, entertaining your boring colleagues, pretending I didn't want more. More what? We had everything. A good life, a beautiful daughter, financial security. We had your version of everything. She turned to face me, her expression cold. Your quiet dinners, your academic friends, your predictable routines. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? The accusation hit like a physical blow. Invisible? I included you in everything. You included your wife in everything, the role you needed me to play. But when did you last ask what I actually wanted? When did my dreams matter? Your dreams? What dreams, Gertrude? You never mentioned being unhappy. She laughed bitterly. Would you have listened? Really listened? Or would you have explained it away with one of your reasonable professor speeches? We stood facing each other across the table that had hosted so many family dinners, so many happy conversations. Now it felt like a battlefield, scattered with evidence of her betrayal. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. "Someone who sees me. Someone who makes me feel alive again instead of just useful." The divorce proceedings stretched through that autumn like a slow-motion car crash. Ruth flew home from college, devastated, trying desperately to mediate between us. "Can't you work it out? Go to counseling? Think about our family?" But Gertrude had already moved out, taking half our furniture and most of our shared memories. She'd found an apartment closer to downtown, closer to her new life. When I drove Ruth there for visits, I'd sit in the car staring at the modern building, wondering how 17 years could dissolve so completely. The final papers were signed on a gray December morning in my lawyer's office. Gertrude wore a red dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled differently. She looked younger, happier, completely transformed from the woman who'd once promised to grow old with me. "This is for the best, Henry," she said as we left the courthouse. "We both deserve to be happy." But happiness, I'd discovered, wasn't something you deserved. It was something you built carefully, day by day, with someone who wanted to build it with you. Now, standing in my kitchen 7 years later, I understood why Gertrude's voice carried such venom. She'd gotten her freedom, her excitement, her new life. But Ruth's wedding was forcing her to confront the family she'd destroyed, to sit across from the woman who'd helped me rebuild what she'd torn down. Beatrice hadn't stolen me from Gertrude. Gertrude had thrown me away. The drive to Ruth's suburban house took exactly 1 hour, Beatrice sitting quietly beside me as we navigated the familiar route through Massachusetts countryside. She'd spent the morning arranging flowers for tomorrow's ceremony, her gentle hands creating beauty despite Gertrude's ugly threats still echoing in my mind. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked as we pulled into Ruth's driveway, noting David and Lenny Wilson's blue sedan already parked under the maple tree. Beatrice adjusted her silk headscarf, a habit from her recovery days that she'd maintained for comfort. "Ruth needs both her families together tonight. I won't let your ex-wife's bitterness ruin that." Ruth answered the door with forced brightness, her arms immediately encircling both of us. "Perfect timing. Michael just finished setting up the guest room, and the Wilsons are helping with dinner prep." Her eyes searched mine. "Everything okay, Dad?" "Absolutely." I kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect." The Wilson parents emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting Lenny's apron as she wiped her hands. "Henry! Beatrice! We're making Ruth's grandmother's dinner rolls." Family tradition, apparently. David Wilson shook my hand firmly. "Good to see you both. Michael's wrestling with some speaker system in the living room if you want to help. Minutes later, Gertrude's silver BMW pulled up with calculated precision, late enough to make an entrance, early enough to claim she wasn't disrupting anything. Through the window, I watched her check her reflection, applying fresh lipstick before stepping out in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "The family's all here now," Ruth whispered, squeezing my arm. Gertrude swept through the front door like a theater actress taking center stage. "Darling Ruth, my beautiful bride!" She embraced our daughter with exaggerated warmth, her eyes scanning the room to catalog who was watching. "And Michael, handsome as always." Her gaze landed on Beatrice. "Beatrice, how practical you look today." "Good evening, Gertrude." Beatrice's voice remained steady, though I felt her hand tighten slightly in mine. "Ruth's home is lovely. Perfect for celebrating." "Yes, well, some celebrations mean more than others, don't they?" Gertrude's smile never wavered. "Family celebrations, the ones that truly matter." "All family celebrations matter," I interjected, recognizing the subtle exclusion in her words. Ruth clapped her hands together. "Kitchen, everyone! Lenny's teaching us Wilson family secrets, and Mom brought her famous lasagna recipe." The dinner preparation became a carefully choreographed dance of divided loyalties. Gertrude positioned herself at the center island, directing operations with the authority of someone who'd once managed this type of gathering regularly. The Wilson parents worked quietly at the counter, exchanging meaningful glances when tensions flared. "Beatrice, dear," Gertrude said while chopping vegetables with unnecessary force, "I hope you're feeling strong enough for tomorrow's festivities. Long days can be so exhausting for someone with your health history." "I'm fine, thank you." Beatrice continued arranging the flowers she'd brought, her movements precise despite the provocation. "Cancer survivors are so brave," Gertrude continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "though I suppose some battles leave more lasting effects than others." My knife hit the cutting board harder than necessary. "Beatrice is completely healthy." "Of course she is. I just worry about stress levels. Wedding days can be overwhelming, especially for someone who's not used to large family gatherings." Ruth appeared between us like a referee. "Mom, can you help me with the wine selection?" "Dad, Michael needs advice about tomorrow's music playlist." The evening progressed through forced conversations and careful seating arrangements. Ruth had obviously planned the dinner table placement strategically. Gertrude at one end, Beatrice and me at the other, with herself and Michael serving as buffers in the middle. The Wilson parents occupied neutral territory, asking safe questions about the weather and weekend plans. "This house has such interesting security features," Gertrude commented casually, glancing toward the small camera mounted discreetly in the corner. "Very modern, very thorough," Ruth beamed proudly. "Michael insisted on the full system after those break-ins last year. Cameras everywhere, motion sensors, the works. Makes me feel safe." "How wonderfully comprehensive." Gertrude's smile seemed particularly satisfied. "Privacy is so important in a home." After dinner, Ruth assigned sleeping arrangements with diplomatic precision. "Mom, you're in the blue guest room upstairs. Dad and Beatrice. You have the green room down the hall. Wilson parents get the master guest suite." She paused. "Tomorrow's going to be early, so everyone should rest well." Standing in our assigned room later, Beatrice sat at the small vanity, carefully removing her headscarf and brushing the hair she'd worked so hard to regrow. 3 years of careful nurturing had restored it to shoulder length, soft brown waves that caught the lamplight. "She's planning something," I said quietly, checking that our door was securely locked. "She's always planning something, Henry. But tomorrow is Ruth's day. Nothing else matters." I watched my wife prepare for sleep, her movements gentle and methodical. After her cancer treatment, she'd developed routines that brought comfort: the silk scarf, the careful hair care, the lavender lotion that helped her relax. Simple rituals that Gertrude had mocked tonight with surgical precision. "Whatever she's planning, I won't let her hurt you." Beatrice smiled at me through the mirror. "She can't hurt me, Henry. Not anymore. Love is stronger than whatever poison she carries." Outside our room, the house settled into quiet preparation for tomorrow's celebration, but sleep felt impossible, knowing Gertrude was somewhere above us, plotting her next move in this war she'd declared against our happiness. Something pulled me from sleep at 7:15, my internal clock conditioned by decades of early morning lectures. Sunlight filtered through the guest room's white curtains, painting everything in soft gold. Wedding day had arrived. Beside me, Beatrice slept peacefully, her silk headscarf perfectly positioned despite the night's movement. She looked serene, beautiful, untouched by yesterday's subtle warfare. I smiled, thinking how lucky Ruth was to have such weather for her ceremony. Moving carefully to avoid disturbing her, I padded to the small guest bathroom, splashed water on my face, and brushed my teeth. The house remained quiet. Even Ruth and Michael weren't stirring yet. Good. Everyone deserved rest before the celebration ahead. Returning to our bed, I settled beside Beatrice and gently touched her shoulder. "Good morning, beautiful. Wedding day's here." She stirred slightly, making that soft humming sound she always made when transitioning from sleep. I reached up to adjust her headscarf, planning to wake her with a gentle kiss. The fabric shifted under my touch. My hand froze. Where thick, healthy hair should have cushioned my fingers, I felt only smooth scalp. Carefully, with growing dread, I lifted the edge of her scarf. Beatrice's hair was gone. Completely gone. Not the gradual loss from chemotherapy that we'd battled together 3 years ago. This was different. Deliberate. Someone had taken scissors and cut away every strand, leaving only stubble across her scalp. "Beatrice," my voice cracked. "Honey, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her features. "Henry, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak, couldn't form words to explain the cruelty I was seeing. Instead, I guided her hand to her head, watching her face transform from sleepy contentment to bewildered horror. "My hair—" She sat up abruptly, both hands exploring her scalp. "It's gone. It's all gone." The scarf fell away completely, revealing the extent of the damage. Whoever had done this possessed surgical precision. Every lock cut close to the roots, the job completed without waking either of us. Professional, planned, methodical. "Oh no, oh no, no, no." Beatrice's voice broke into sobs. "Not again. Please, not again." I gathered her into my arms as she crumbled, her body shaking with the force of memories this violation had triggered. 3 years of careful growth, 3 years of healing, destroyed in one night of calculated malice. "Who could have done this?" I whispered, though my mind was already cataloging possibilities. "Someone came into our room while we slept." Beatrice pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "The cancer, when I lost it all before. I thought I was dying. I thought I'd never feel beautiful again." "You are beautiful. Hair doesn't change that. You don't understand." Her voice carried pain that cut deeper than any physical wound. "When I was sick, I looked in the mirror and saw death looking back. It took years to see myself as alive again, as whole. And now—" I began examining our room systematically, looking for evidence of entry. The door remained locked from the inside. The window was latched securely. No signs of forced entry anywhere. "Someone had a key," I concluded grimly. "Someone with access to this house. Please don't make this bigger than it needs to be." Beatrice wrapped the scarf around her head again, trying to restore some dignity. "It's Ruth's wedding day. I won't let this ruin her happiness." "This isn't an accident, Beatrice. This was deliberate." My mind raced through logical possibilities. Michael and Ruth wouldn't harm Beatrice. The Wilson parents had no motive. That left only one person with both access and incentive. The scissors. I searched the small room, checking drawers and surfaces. Whoever did this took the scissors with them. Beatrice stood shakily, moving to the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection revealed the full scope of the destruction. Years of careful growth eliminated in one night of pure spite. "She warned me," I said quietly. "On the phone Friday night. Gertrude said you were too fragile for family events. You don't know it was her? Who else?" My anger built with each passing second. Who else benefits from humiliating you on Ruth's wedding day? Even if it was her, what's confronting her going to accomplish? She'll deny it. Ruth will be devastated. The wedding will be ruined. But I was already moving toward the door, fury overriding all other considerations. Someone had violated our sanctuary, attacked my wife in the cruelest way possible, and I wasn't going to let them escape consequences. "Henry, please." Beatrice caught my arm. "Think about Ruth. Think about what matters most. What matters most is protecting my family. All of my family. The sound of movement from the kitchen below indicated others were waking. Perfect. Time for answers. I found Gertrude in the kitchen, standing at the coffee maker with her back to the doorway. She wore a pale blue robe and matching slippers, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Too perfectly styled for someone who'd supposedly just awakened. "Good morning, Henry." She didn't turn around, focusing intently on measuring coffee grounds. "You're up early for a wedding day." "You did this, Gertrude." My voice carried across the kitchen like an accusation. She turned slowly, her expression shifting from casual morning pleasantness to carefully constructed surprise. "I beg your pardon? Did what?" Beatrice appeared behind me, still clutching her headscarf, trying to pull me back from the confrontation I was determined to have. "Someone cut Beatrice's hair while she slept. Cut it all off." I stepped further into the kitchen, forcing Gertrude to face the consequences of her cruelty. "You're the only one who benefits from humiliating her." "Cut her hair?" Gertrude's eyes widened with practiced shock. "That's terrible. Who would do such a thing?" "Stop pretending, Gertrude. You threatened her on Friday night. You said she was too fragile for family events." "I said no such thing." She moved to pour coffee, her hands steady despite my accusations. "I've been nothing but gracious to that woman since she entered our family." "Our family?" The words exploded from me. "You destroyed our family 7 years ago." Footsteps thundered down the stairs as Ruth and Michael appeared, both in pajamas, their faces creased with sleep and growing alarm. "What's happening?" Ruth demanded, scanning the scene. "Dad, why are you shouting?" "Someone cut Beatrice's hair off during the night," I explained, watching Ruth's expression shift from confusion to horror. "Cut it all off while she slept." "Oh my goodness!" Ruth rushed to Beatrice, gently touching her covered head. "Who would do something so awful?" "Your mother," I said flatly. "Henry Miller!" Gertrude slammed her coffee mug onto the counter. "How dare you accuse me of something so ridiculous? I've been in my room all night." Michael stepped between us, his hands raised peacefully. "Everyone, please calm down. Let's figure this out rationally." "There's nothing to figure out," Gertrude continued, her voice rising with indignation. "Maybe she cut it herself for attention. Some people will do anything to make themselves the center of drama." "Don't you dare!" I started forward, but Beatrice caught my arm. "Please stop," she whispered. "This is exactly what she wants." The Wilson parents appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Lenny wrapped her robe tighter, her face creased with concern, while David assessed the situation with careful eyes. "What if it was an intruder?" Gertrude suggested, warming to her performance. "Someone who broke in during the night? This neighborhood has had problems before." "The house was locked," Michael said quietly. "Security system armed. No one came in from outside." "Then maybe someone already inside did it," Gertrude shot back, "though I can't imagine who would be so cruel." Ruth sank into a kitchen chair, her wedding day joy crumbling around her. "Today was supposed to be perfect. How can this be happening?" "Because your mother can't stand seeing me happy," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Because she'd rather destroy a family than admit she made mistakes. I won't stand here and listen to these baseless accusations." Gertrude grabbed her coffee and headed toward the doorway. "Some of us have a wedding to prepare for. Running away won't change what you did." She paused at the threshold, turning back with a smile that made my blood freeze. "Henry dear, you always were prone to paranoid fantasies. Perhaps you should consider whether your wife's condition might be affecting your judgment." The cruelty of that final shot left everyone speechless. Even Ruth stared at her mother with dawning recognition of who Gertrude really was. "Get out," I said quietly. "This isn't your house, Henry. Get out of this kitchen before I do something we'll both regret." Gertrude's smile widened. "See? Unstable. Just like I predicted." She swept from the room, leaving behind a wake of destroyed morning peace and shattered wedding day dreams. Ruth buried her face in her hands, while Michael stood helplessly beside her, unsure how to fix what had been broken. "I'm so sorry," Beatrice whispered to no one in particular. "I never wanted this to happen." But Gertrude had miscalculated one crucial detail. As I stood in that kitchen, watching my wife comfort my heartbroken daughter, I remembered Ruth mentioning something the night before. Something about cameras. Something about comprehensive security systems that recorded everything. Everything. Wait, Ruth stopped mid-sentence, her hand flying to her mouth. The security cameras. Michael, we have cameras throughout the house. Michael's eyes widened with sudden understanding. The system records everything automatically. We can check what actually happened last night. I felt my heart accelerate. Justice. Finally, irrefutable proof of Gertrude's calculated cruelty. That's brilliant, I said, moving toward the living room where their entertainment system dominated one wall. Let's see exactly what happened. Gertrude remained frozen in the kitchen doorway, her coffee mug trembling slightly in her hands. Really, this is unnecessary. We should focus on preparing for the wedding. The wedding? Ruth's voice cracked with emotion. Mom, someone attacked Beatrice in our house, in our guest room. We need to know who. Michael was already at the smart TV, pulling up the security system interface. The cameras save everything to cloud storage. We can access any time period from the last 30 days. This is ridiculous, Gertrude protested, but she'd lost the commanding tone from earlier. Surely everyone doesn't need to crowd around watching. Yes, everyone does, I interrupted firmly. Everyone needs to see the truth. The Wilson parents appeared tentatively, drawn by the commotion. Lenny wrapped her robe tighter while David assessed the situation with careful, intelligent eyes. What's happening now? Lenny asked softly. We're checking security footage from last night, Michael explained, navigating through digital menus. Someone cut Beatrice's hair while she slept. How awful, Lenny gasped, her hand covering her heart. Who would do such a terrible thing? Michael found the correct interface. Here we go. What time should I start checking? Try around 2 a.m., I suggested. Most people would be deeply asleep by then. The screen filled with multiple camera angles, hallway views, staircase monitoring, guest room corridor coverage. Michael fast-forwarded through hours of empty hallways, the timestamp racing through late evening into early morning. There, Beatrice whispered, pointing at the screen. Something's moving. Michael slowed the playback. A figure appeared in the upstairs hallway, moving carefully down the corridor toward our guest room. The person carried something small and metallic, clearly scissors, and moved with deliberate stealth. Even in the dim hallway lighting, the figure was unmistakable. Mom, Ruth breathed, her voice barely audible. That's you. Gertrude's coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the kitchen tile. Dark liquid spread across the floor like an accusation. The footage continued, showing Gertrude approaching our guest room door. She paused, listening, then carefully turned the handle. The camera angle shifted as Michael selected the guest room corridor view, providing a clear shot of Gertrude entering our room. She's got keys to every room, Michael said quietly. House keys. I never thought... We watched in horrified silence as Gertrude disappeared into our room for nearly 20 minutes. When she emerged, she no longer carried the scissors. Her hands were empty, but her posture suggested satisfaction. A job completed successfully. The timestamp shows 2:47 a.m. to 3:03 a.m., Michael noted. 16 minutes inside your room. Ruth turned to face her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. How could you? How could you plan something so cruel? It's not what it looks like, Gertrude stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. I was checking on everyone, making sure people were safe. With scissors? I demanded. For 16 minutes? David Wilson spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of his former teaching career. Mrs. Foster, the video evidence is quite clear. Perhaps it's time for honesty. Gertrude's composure finally cracked completely. She just looked so much better than me, her perfect hair, her perfect marriage, her perfect little life after cancer. Do you know what it's like to watch someone else get everything you lost? The room fell silent except for Beatrice's quiet sobbing and the sound of Gertrude's ragged breathing. So you decided to make her look like a cancer patient again, I said, my voice deadly quiet. You decided to take away the hair she'd grown back after fighting for her life. I barely cut anything, Gertrude protested weakly. Her hair will grow back. It's not permanent damage. Not permanent? Beatrice looked up through her tears. Do you have any idea what growing that hair back meant to me? What it symbolized? Ruth sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. My wedding day? You ruined my wedding day. I didn't ruin anything. You're all making this bigger than it needs to be. But even Gertrude seemed to realize how hollow her protest sounded. The evidence was undeniable. Clear HD footage of premeditated cruelty, documented from multiple angles with precise timestamps. I think, David Wilson said carefully, that everyone needs some time to process this situation. Michael paused the video system, the final image frozen on Gertrude's satisfied exit from our guest room. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Ruth finally spoke. I want you to leave, Mom. Leave our house and don't come back until you can apologize properly. Ruth, honey, it's your wedding day. Exactly. It's my wedding day, and I refuse to celebrate surrounded by someone capable of such calculated cruelty. Gertrude looked around the room, seeking support that clearly wasn't coming. Even Lenny Wilson, naturally diplomatic and kind, couldn't meet her eyes. Fine, Gertrude said finally, straightening her shoulders in a gesture I recognized from our marriage. If that's how you all want to be. She swept from the room with as much dignity as someone caught red-handed could muster, leaving behind the shattered coffee mug and the undeniable truth of what she'd done. An hour later, Beatrice and I sat in my car, pulling away from Ruth's house in heavy silence. The morning's revelations weighed between us like a third passenger, unwelcome but impossible to ignore. She needs space to prepare, I explained, though Beatrice hadn't questioned our early departure. And honestly, I need space to think. Beatrice adjusted her headscarf in the passenger seat mirror, her movements careful and deliberate. Promise me you'll let this go, Henry. The request hit me like a physical blow. Let it go? After what we just saw? Promise me. Her voice carried a desperate edge I hadn't heard since her cancer diagnosis. I can't bear the thought of more conflict today. Ruth's wedding should be about joy, not revenge. I navigated onto the highway, spring sunshine streaming through our windows in stark contrast to the darkness I felt building inside. Beautiful day for a wedding. Beautiful day for justice, too. Some actions have consequences, Beatrice. Real consequences. And some battles aren't worth fighting. She turned to face me, her eyes reflecting pain that went beyond this morning's violation. After everything I've been through after fighting cancer and winning, I've learned what really matters. This isn't it. This isn't what? Someone deliberately attacking you, cutting off the hair you fought so hard to regrow? The hair will grow back, she said quietly. But family damage might not heal. Ruth just banished her own mother from her wedding day. Isn't that enough? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the black leather. It's not enough. Not nearly enough. We drove in silence for several miles, passing familiar landmarks that marked our route back to Boston. The suburban houses gave way to urban density, but my mind remained focused on the video footage we'd witnessed. Gertrude's careful planning, her calculated timing, her satisfaction at completing her cruel task. You don't understand, I said finally. You're thinking about this as someone who's faced real mortality, real crisis. But I'm thinking about it as someone who failed to protect you. Failed to protect me? Henry, you couldn't have prevented this. I could have insisted we stay in a hotel. I could have recognized the threat she posed. I could have... Stop. Beatrice reached across to touch my arm. You're not responsible for her choices, but I am responsible for mine. Something in my tone made her hand tighten on my sleeve. What does that mean? I couldn't meet her eyes. It means I cannot forgive this kind of deliberate cruelty. I cannot pretend it didn't happen, and I cannot let her escape consequences. What kind of consequences? Instead of answering, I took the exit toward our neighborhood, my mind already working through possibilities. Gertrude had humiliated Beatrice publicly, deliberately on our daughter's wedding day. Justice demanded a proportional response. Promise me, Beatrice said again, her voice smaller now. Promise me you won't do anything to escalate this. I promise I won't do anything to hurt Ruth's wedding. That's not the same thing. No, it's not. We pulled into our driveway 30 minutes later, the conversation unresolved and tension crackling between us. Beatrice climbed out slowly, exhaustion evident in every movement. The morning's trauma had drained her completely. I'm going to rest before we need to get ready, she said, not meeting my eyes. Please don't do anything foolish while I sleep. I watched her walk toward our front door, shoulders slumped with defeat and exhaustion. She'd survived cancer, rebuilt her life, and learned to trust again. Gertrude had attacked all of that with surgical precision. Inside our house, I poured myself coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same place where Gertrude's phone call had started this nightmare 2 days ago. But now I had advantages I hadn't possessed then. Evidence, witnesses, and most importantly, a clear understanding of exactly who Gertrude Foster really was. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. "Dad, I'm so sorry about Mom. Are you and Beatrice okay? Wedding still at 4 p.m. Love you both," I typed back. "We'll be there. Wouldn't miss your special day." But I didn't mention what else I'd be bringing to that wedding. Gertrude wanted to play psychological warfare? She'd chosen the wrong opponent. While Beatrice slept upstairs, I began making phone calls. The Grand Meridian Hotel sprawled across 3 acres of manicured gardens in Cambridge, its stone facade gleaming in the late afternoon sunshine. Perfect venue for Ruth's dream wedding, elegant, traditional, with enough space for both celebration and, if necessary, public revelation. "It's beautiful," Beatrice murmured as we walked through the main entrance. She'd chosen a navy blue dress that complemented her headscarf, looking dignified despite the morning's trauma. "Ruth has excellent taste." I squeezed her hand gently. "She gets that from both her parents." The ceremony would take place in the hotel's garden courtyard, with reception following in the adjacent ballroom. Guests were already arriving, a mix of friends from Ruth's work, Michael's engineering colleagues, and extended family members who'd traveled for the celebration. We found our seats in the front row, family section clearly marked with small floral arrangements. Across the aisle, chairs remained conspicuously empty, Gertrude's section awaiting her arrival. "Do you think she'll actually come?" Beatrice asked quietly. "Oh, she'll come. Gertrude never misses an opportunity for drama." David and Lenny Wilson appeared, both dressed impeccably and looking somewhat recovered from the morning's revelations. They chose seats carefully, positioning themselves between family sections like diplomatic peacekeepers. "Henry, Beatrice," David nodded formally. "How are you both holding up?" "We're fine," I replied. "Today is about Ruth's happiness." "Indeed." His eyes held questions he was too polite to ask. More guests filtered in, Ruth's college friends, Michael's family from Connecticut, neighbors from their suburban development, normal people living normal lives, unaware of the psychological warfare that had preceded this celebration. The string quartet began playing processional music, signaling ceremony start in 15 minutes. Still, no sign of Gertrude. "Maybe she decided not to come," Beatrice whispered hopefully. Then I saw her. Gertrude swept through the garden entrance like a movie star arriving at a premiere. She wore a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, paired with pearls and heels that added 3 inches to her height. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup professionally applied. Overcompensation, I realized. She was trying to overwhelm the morning's humiliation with pure magnificence. "That dress is inappropriate," Beatrice observed quietly. "Too formal, too attention-seeking." Gertrude paused at the entrance, scanning the crowd with calculating eyes. When her gaze landed on us, her smile turned predatory. She began making her way down the aisle, stopping to greet guests with exaggerated warmth. "Beatrice, dear," her voice carried across the garden as she approached our section. "That headscarf is so practical for someone in your situation." Several nearby guests turned to stare, clearly sensing tension but uncertain about its source. "Hello, Gertrude," Beatrice replied evenly. "You look eager for attention." "Just celebrating our daughter's special day. Though I suppose some people handle stress differently than others." I felt my jaw clench, but forced myself to remain seated. Not yet. Not during the ceremony. Gertrude continued her performance, positioning herself prominently in the front row across from us. She waved at guests, blew kisses to distant relatives, and generally commanded attention like a secondary bride. The processional music swelled, and the wedding party began their entrance. Michael's groomsmen walked with measured steps, followed by Ruth's bridesmaids in soft lavender dresses. Finally, Ruth appeared on the arm of her uncle, my brother Tom, who'd flown in from California to give her away. She looked radiant, absolutely radiant, white silk gown flowing behind her, veil catching the afternoon breeze, face glowing with pure happiness. For a moment, all the morning's ugliness faded away. This was what mattered. Ruth's joy, Ruth's future, Ruth's perfect moment. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. Heartfelt vows, emotional ring exchange, traditional unity candle lighting. Ruth and Michael gazed at each other with the kind of love that made observers believe in forever. But throughout the ceremony, I remained aware of Gertrude's positioning and behavior. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief during emotional moments, posed strategically for photographer attention, and whispered comments to nearby guests. "She's building her narrative," I murmured to Beatrice during the ring exchange, "playing the devoted mother role." "Let her," Beatrice whispered back, "as long as she doesn't disrupt Ruth's moment." The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Michael kissed Ruth with tender passion while guests erupted in applause. Photographer bulbs flashed, capturing the perfect moment for posterity. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, guests began moving toward the reception area. Cocktail hour would last 90 minutes, followed by dinner and dancing. Plenty of time for what I had planned. "Henry," Beatrice caught my arm as we stood, "whatever you're thinking, please reconsider." "I'm thinking about justice," I replied quietly, "and sometimes justice requires public revelation." She searched my eyes, recognizing something that made her uncomfortable. "Promise me you won't ruin Ruth's reception." "I promise I won't ruin anything that matters." But as we walked toward the ballroom, I checked my jacket pocket one final time. The USB drive containing this morning's security footage felt solid and purposeful against my fingers. Gertrude wanted to play games? Tonight, she'd learn the real rules. The moment arrived with the clinking of champagne glasses and the gentle dimming of ballroom lights. Reception dinner had concluded perfectly. 3 courses of elegant hotel cuisine, wine flowing freely, guests relaxed and happy. Ruth glowed with bridal radiance while Michael beamed beside her, both oblivious to the storm approaching. "Time for speeches," the wedding coordinator announced, adjusting the microphone at the head table. "We'll begin with the father of the bride." Beatrice's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "Please keep it simple, Henry. Just wish them happiness." I stood slowly, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my jacket pocket. 80 guests turned expectant faces toward me, wine-warmed and trusting. Perfect audience for what I had planned. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Ruth and Michael's beautiful wedding day," I began, my professor's voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "Today we witness not just a marriage, but the joining of 2 wonderful families." Applause rippled through the room. Ruth smiled proudly while Gertrude, seated at a table across the room, preened with satisfaction. She'd spent the evening working the crowd, rebuilding her social standing after the morning's disgrace. "Ruth, you look absolutely radiant, and Michael, you're the luckiest man alive to have found such an extraordinary woman." More applause. Marriage teaches us about love, commitment, and most importantly, protecting those we cherish. The word protecting carried special weight, though only I understood its significance yet. Many of you know my wife Beatrice fought a courageous battle against cancer 3 years ago. I turned slightly toward her, noting how she tensed at the unexpected direction. For 2 years, she lost her beautiful hair to chemotherapy. When it finally grew back, it represented more than vanity. It symbolized her victory over disease, her strength, her survival, her hope. Murmurs of sympathy and admiration arose from guests familiar with Beatrice's journey. She looked puzzled but touched by the public recognition. That hair was precious to her, precious to all of us who love her. Gertrude shifted uncomfortably in her seat, perhaps sensing the speech's unusual trajectory. Her smile became more forced. This morning, someone crept into our guest room while Beatrice slept peacefully. My voice hardened perceptibly. Someone cut off all her hair with scissors, leaving her completely bald again. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Guests exchanged shocked glances while Ruth's face went pale with dawning horror. This wasn't an accident or a prank. This was calculated cruelty designed to humiliate a cancer survivor on her daughter's wedding day. Gertrude half rose from her chair, her face flushing deep red. "Henry, this is inappropriate." The perpetrator wanted to rob Beatrice of her dignity, her confidence, her symbol of survival. I continued without acknowledging the interruption. They wanted to make her look sick again, vulnerable again, defeated again. "Stop this immediately!" Gertrude's voice cracked with panic. that someone was Gertrude Foster, mother of the bride. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock throughout the room. We have high-definition video evidence of her deliberate actions, captured by security cameras in Ruth's home. Complete silence gripped the ballroom. 80 faces turned between me and Gertrude, processing the magnitude of accusation. She attacked a vulnerable woman to satisfy her own jealousy and spite. She violated the safety of our family's home to commit this act of psychological warfare. Gertrude stood fully now, her hands shaking with rage and fear. "You're destroying Ruth's wedding day." "No, Gertrude. You destroyed it the moment you decided cruelty was acceptable. I'm simply ensuring everyone understands what kind of character we're dealing with in our family." I returned to my seat as shocked silence stretched across the ballroom. Conversations erupted at every table, hushed, urgent exchanges as guests absorbed the revelation. Gertrude remained standing, isolated in a sea of judgmental stares. "Henry," Beatrice whispered, her voice a mixture of horror and gratitude. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." I squeezed her hand gently. Justice demanded a public response to public cruelty. Ruth stared across the room at her mother with expressions cycling between betrayal, disgust, and profound disappointment. The fairy tale wedding had become something else entirely, a reckoning. The stunned silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, though probably lasted only 30 seconds. 80 guests sat frozen, champagne glasses forgotten, processing the devastating revelation that had just shattered the celebratory atmosphere. Then the whispers began. "Did he just say she cut off a cancer patient's hair?" The murmur came from a table of Ruth's college friends, their voices carrying in the too-quiet ballroom. "While she was sleeping?" Another voice, horrified and disbelieving. "That's absolutely despicable," David Wilson said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. His wife Lenny nodded vigorously, her face creased with genuine disgust. Gertrude remained standing at her table, looking desperately around the room for any sign of support or sympathy. Finding none, she attempted damage control. "You're all hearing only one side of the story," she called out, her voice shrill with desperation. "Henry is exaggerating what happened for dramatic effect." "We saw the video evidence this morning," Ruth said quietly, but her words carried across the silent room. "Mom, we all watched you do it." A collective gasp arose from the guests. Video evidence eliminated any possibility of misunderstanding or exaggeration. How could someone do that to a cancer survivor? Lenny Wilson's voice trembled with emotion. She rose from her table and walked directly to Beatrice, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "My dear, you're incredibly brave for being here tonight." Other guests began moving as well, away from Gertrude's table, toward ours. The physical repositioning spoke louder than words about where sympathies lay. "There's no excuse for that kind of behavior," declared Professor Williams from my university, a man known for measured opinions. "Attacking someone while they sleep, that's the action of a coward." "She should be ashamed of herself," added his wife, not bothering to lower her voice. Gertrude's face cycled through several shades of red as she realized her social standing was evaporating in real time. "I was protecting my family's interests. She was trying to upstage me at my daughter's wedding." The justification only made things worse. Several guests actually recoiled at the selfishness of the statement. "Protecting your interests?" Ruth stood up, her wedding dress rustling with the force of her movement. "By attacking my stepmother while she slept? By cutting off hair she grew back after fighting cancer?" Michael placed a supporting hand on his new wife's shoulder. "Mom Foster, I think you should consider leaving." The suggestion hung in the air like a verdict. Guests nodded agreement while Gertrude looked around frantically for any remaining allies. "Ruth, darling, surely you don't want to banish your own mother." "You banished yourself with your actions," Ruth said firmly. "I'm embarrassed to call you my mother right now." The social isolation was complete and devastating. Gertrude's table sat empty as former companions found excuses to move elsewhere. Conversations continued around her, but she was no longer part of them, a pariah at her own daughter's wedding. "I can't believe we've known her for years and never realized what she was capable of," someone whispered behind me. "That poor woman," another voice said, referring to Beatrice. "To survive cancer and then have someone deliberately take away her recovery symbol? It's monstrous." Beatrice sat quietly beside me, accepting sympathy from a steady stream of guests who approached our table. Her dignity in the face of public revelation was remarkable. Gracious, composed, genuinely touched by the support. "Thank you," she said to each person. "Your kindness means more than you know." Gertrude made one final desperate attempt at control. "This is supposed to be about celebrating Ruth and Michael. You're all letting Henry turn it into something ugly." But the accusation fell flat. Everyone present understood that the ugliness had begun with her actions, not with their exposure. "Some actions demand consequences," I said quietly, though my words carried to nearby tables. "Cruelty shouldn't be rewarded with silence." The sentiment clearly resonated. Nods of agreement rippled through the crowd as guests recognized the justice and public accountability for private wrongs. Gertrude gathered her purse with shaking hands, finally accepting that her position had become untenable. The walk to the ballroom exit would require crossing the entire room under the judgmental gaze of 80 witnesses to her humiliation. She took her first step toward the door, and the real consequences of her cruelty began. The walk across the ballroom stretched like a gauntlet of judgment. Every step Gertrude took toward the exit brought her past tables of guests who followed her movement with undisguised contempt and disappointment. Conversations didn't stop. They intensified, creating a wall of whispered condemnation that accompanied her retreat. "After everything Beatrice has been through," someone murmured as she passed. "The cruelty of it is just breathtaking," came another voice. Gertrude kept her chin raised, attempting to maintain dignity while her carefully constructed social persona crumbled around her. But I could see the tremor in her hands, the slight stumble in her expensive heels, the way her breathing had become shallow and rapid. She paused at the ballroom entrance, turning back for one last, desperate appeal. "Ruth, please don't let him turn you against your own mother." Ruth looked up from her position at the head table, surrounded by friends and Michael's family, offering support and comfort. "I'm not turning against you, Mom. I'm turning away from someone who attacks vulnerable people while they sleep." The final rejection hit Gertrude like a physical blow. Her shoulders sagged slightly before she straightened them again in that gesture I remembered from our divorce proceedings. False bravado, masking complete defeat. She disappeared through the doorway, leaving behind only the echo of whispered judgments and the collective exhale of a community that had witnessed justice served. "Henry?" Beatrice said quietly, her hand finding mine on the table. "Thank you for defending me." "Always," I replied, meaning it completely. Ruth approached our table, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a cloud of silk and redemption. "Dad, I understand why you had to do this. Some things can't be ignored or forgiven quietly." "Your happiness matters most," I said, standing to embrace her. I couldn't let her poison this day with her cruelty. Michael joined us, his arm circling his new wife's waist. "Sir, you showed real courage exposing that. Beatrice deserved justice, and frankly, so did we. We deserved to know who we were really dealing with." The Wilson parents approached, both looking shaken but relieved. "Professor Miller," David said formally, "what you did took tremendous strength. Some behaviors demand public accountability." "No one should attack a cancer survivor," Lenny added firmly, "especially not family. That woman needed to face consequences." Around us, the reception was slowly returning to its celebratory atmosphere. Guests who had been shocked into silence began talking and laughing again, the tension dissipating like smoke in the wind. The band started playing soft background music, and servers began circulating with after-dinner drinks. "Look around," I said to Beatrice, gesturing at the renewed celebration. "Everyone here supports you, respects you. You're surrounded by people who recognize your strength and dignity." She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. "I feel it. For the first time since this morning, I feel safe and valued." Ruth returned to her head table, where Michael was already organizing the cutting of their wedding cake. The photographer captured moment after moment of joy and celebration, images that would preserve this day's triumph over adversity. One of my university colleagues approached, drink in hand. "Henry, that was brilliantly handled. You gave that woman exactly what she deserved. Public accountability for private cruelty." "Justice required a proportional response," I replied. "She wanted to humiliate Beatrice publicly, so public exposure seemed appropriate. Through the ballroom windows, I caught a glimpse of Gertrude's silver BMW pulling out of the parking lot, her taillights disappearing into the evening darkness. She was leaving alone, socially defeated, her reputation in ruins, exactly the consequences her actions deserved. She'll think twice before attacking anyone else, Beatrice observed quietly. She'll think twice before showing her face in this community again, I corrected. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. As the evening progressed, guest after guest approached our table with words of support, praise for my protective actions, and genuine affection for Beatrice. The community had spoken clearly about its values. Cruelty would not be tolerated, vulnerability would be protected, and justice would be served. Ruth and Michael's first dance began, a slow waltz that seemed to wash away the evening's earlier drama. They moved together with perfect synchronization, lost in each other's eyes, surrounded by the love and support of people who genuinely cared about their happiness. Perfect ending, I murmured, watching my daughter find her fairy tale after all. Beatrice leaned against my shoulder, content and peaceful for the first time in days. Justice served, family protected, and love triumphant. Yes, it's perfect. The celebration continued long into the evening, but the real victory had already been won, a clear demonstration that cruelty has consequences, that protecting the vulnerable is worth any social cost, and that sometimes public revelation is the only adequate response to private wrong. Gertrude had learned a lesson she'd never forget. Some actions demand public accountability, and some people refuse to be bullied into silence. The scales of justice, once tilted by her calculated cruelty, had been balanced again. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.